Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Behemoth, Opvs Contra Natvram, out September 16th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 10 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's 12th full-length studio album. They are a Polish black metal band. I'm not a big fan of the design of this record. I'm actually not a big fan of a lot of elements on this record, but I want to start off with the design because it doesn't allow me to feel fully connected with the album. It doesn't allow me to feel fully engaged with the listening experience. Look at this album as you would look at a book, but a book with missing chapters. You're not really sure where you're going, and when you get there, you're not really sure how you got there. And when you look back looking for that missing piece just doesn't exist. That's how this album comes across. And you don't have to look too far to see it. Looking at the opening song, Post God Nirvana, really an intro track that's around 3 minutes, and that's not the problem. The problem is that it doesn't take you anywhere. When you look at the following song, Malaria Vvlgata, these two tracks should be part A and part B of the same song, and it's not the case. The two are disconnected from one another, and that's going to be the same issue happening throughout the entire album. You're not going to find any two songs on this record coming back to back that have a perfect sense of continuity, that you can say that one starts exactly where the other one left off. There's a break, it's abrupt, it's a choppy album all around. This has a negative impact in the overall playability and the fluidity and how you're going to connect with the album and how you're going to stay connected, because it gives you a sense that you can leave the album experience at any given time. It works from a single format, it doesn't work from a full-length album experience. When it comes down to the sound, this album is Behemoth. The problem is that you have 10 different faces of Behemoth. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel and they're creating something they haven't done before. This album is close to home, but it's not balanced. It's not cohesive. The soundscape is not balanced. There isn't a signature sound element that you can say that connects all 10 songs. If you look back at the 11 previous records, I think you're going to find elements in those albums that are represented in these 10 tracks. So the tracks come across more as a greatest hits without really creating a greatest hits, just taking elements from previous records, adding some new elements, trying to create a new sound that's based on old sound. And I don't mind this approach. It's not a bad idea, but it was not executed in a way that really allows the album to have some sort of life, to not just work on the individual basis, but then work as a collective. That signature element, that signature sound that's so important in order to define a record is missing on this album. I like to look back at a song and say that that song based on that sound is coming from this era or is coming from this record. When you listen to this album, it's very hard to tell where these songs are coming from because they don't feel like they belong in the same album. They don't feel like they belong in the same era, in the same universe, in the same arena. The album just doesn't have that sort of sound that becomes a little bit uniform without becoming repetitive. The album really misses that. Now, there are some elements that stay consistent throughout the entire album, like the drums and bass, but those two elements alone is not enough to carry the album, is not enough to give it a sense of cohesiveness. I do like those two elements. I do like the drums on this album. They're very powerful, they're very heavy, very thunderous, and they're really jumping off in the mix. The mix on this record really gives a lot of emphasis to the drum sound and the bass sound, perhaps more than what we've seen before. It allows them to drive a lot of the experience, it allows them to drive a lot of the songs. I'm just not quite sure if those are the two elements in the sound that I want driving the songs. I want the guitars to have more of that role, and I felt that on this album they were not consistent enough to have a positive impact. They're well played, they offer melody, they offer darkness, they're gritty at times, they're very defined at others, but they don't really jump into the forefront and grab your attention. You're really looking for that element on the album sound-wise, and I don't feel like while the drums have power and the bass has impact, those two are not enough to do that, and then something is missing. And I think that lack of signature, that lack of definition in the sound really comes from the guitars not being as powerful, as driven, as much on a pedestal as they should have been for the album to have a little bit more strength in the sound, and more importantly, on how you perceive that sound. Now, when it comes to the vocals, I like the vocals in terms of how they connect with the tracks. You really get the best vocal performance for every single song on this album. And Behemoth is Behemoth. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel here. You're going to get some backing vocals, you're going to get some choirs, and those choirs really help some songs have a little bit more of an impact really help those songs have a little bit more of a drive. Songs like the Deathless Sun and Off to War are two of the best songs on this record by far. The problem is just two. We need more of that sort of style, more of that sort of impact musically and vocally for the album to have a little bit more strength. And when I look deeper into the vocal performance, because you don't have a sound signature that really jumps out, that becomes the DNA of the record, you start to pay a lot more attention to what the vocals are doing. And on this album, I felt like the overall sound, at least the experience that the album gives, and this doesn't mean every song sounds like that, but the experience that this album gives sound-wise, it's almost like you're listening to a movie score and the vocals are the narrator of that movie score. Once again, this is nothing new for Behemoth, this style, this approach. We've seen it before. But it's emphasized on this album because of the sound not having the same impact that I was hoping that it would have, that more defined impact. And because of that, the album really becomes glued to that narrator style approach. And it doesn't work on songs that don't have a lot of intensity. It works well on songs like the Deathless Sun, Off to War, two tracks that have a lot of power, a lot of drive, very intense, very aggressive. So having the vocals come in on that narrator style, but still following along with the movement of the song, perfect. You don't lose anything, you're fully connected. Those tracks also have great choruses that are very memorable, so everything is in the right place at the right time. But when you have songs that are a little bit more methodic, that move slightly slower, you lose the listener because the vocals just start to become a little bit boring. They start to fall in line with nothing, and nothing is what's coming out of these songs. You don't feel fully connected, fully engaged with these tracks sound-wise, and then the vocals don't help the experience either. All around, this is just not a memorable record by Behemoth. My expectations were a lot higher. Having said that, the singles kind of define a little bit of what this album is all about. It's a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. There are some great songs on this record, but it's not a great album when you put them all together under one single umbrella. As far as favorite tracks outside of the singles, outside of the Deathless Sun and Off to War, I have to mention Malaria Vvlgata. This is the shortest track on the album, it's the second track, just over the 2-minute mark, very driven. It has a very compact nature to it. It should have been better connected with Post-God Nirvana. I really feel like it was a missed opportunity to have these two songs become part of a much larger track. In a concert setting, you could really have the concert starting off with these two songs because it would allow you to start the concert, engage the listener, and keep the listener moving along with the overall experience. But it's a short track, short-lived, but it's compact, it's heavy, it's driven, it has great bass, great drums. Both elements really pop out throughout the entire song. The guitars help define the experience, but the sound, the darkness, the drive, the intensity, the aggression falls on the shoulders of the drums and the bass. The guitar is there to add melody. It has a great solo section, and that solo section allows the song to feel a little bit brighter, to feel a little bit bigger, while still keeping everything around that 2-minute mark, so very compact. The vocals are a little bit of the glue that holds it all together. Next you have Neo-Spartacvs. The bass on this track really defines the sound experience. This is one of the songs where you're gonna find a lot more bass in the mix, where you're gonna see it, when you're gonna hear it, you're gonna feel it. It helps give darkness to the overall atmosphere of this track. It also helps create the different momentums that the song has. The drums are thunderous, but they also know how to bring it back down a notch and control themselves. The drums help create ebbs and flows, but those ebbs and flows are better defined by the bass sound. Together they work as one with different roles but the same goal in mind. The guitars bring in your traditional Behemoth atmosphere, your Behemoth melodies, your Behemoth darkness, that it's there, and that's intertwined with those drums, with those bass, but it's not in the forefront necessarily. It's more of a layer, and sometimes you lose track of it, sometimes you find it again, because everything else is just a lot more in the forefront than what the guitars are. Same thing could be said for the vocals. Now, the vocals have a lot of diversity on this track, and that makes the song feel more robust. It gives more volume, a bigger footprint to how the song comes across. Another one of my favorite songs outside of those two, and you know, I'm not going to talk about the singles, and outside of the singles in general, is Once Upon a Pale Horse. I really enjoyed this track because it had a climax at the end. It's a song that's very methodic as it moves along. The vocals drive most of the experience. You really feel like everything is in the backseat and the vocals are dominating where you're going. They're dictating where you're going, how fast you're going, and what direction you're going. So the vocals are in the forefront, everything else is behind, is moving very methodically, is moving with the same, with a slow momentum, if you will. And while the guitars have an impact in the melody and the experience in the atmosphere, they don't really drive it. They get to that edge, but they allow the vocals to always be the ones on the driver's seat. Now, the song closes off in a climatic moment. It gains more volume, it gains more explosiveness, it becomes bigger, and the solo section to close off the track adds to that. That lighting the fuse at the end of the track is only possible because the solo section is there. So you have this methodic movement, you have this gradual movement, and then you have this explosive sound, this explosive experience that is only made even bigger, brighter, larger, more intense because of how the solo section comes across. The energy that helps give the track is phenomenal. It comes at the right time, at the right moment, and it makes the song feel complete in its nature, in its sound experience, and in its design. This is it, Behemoth Opvs Contra Natvram, out September 16th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.